Hello, I'm Betty Swan. Welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you get help for those tough decisions in your life. Tonight, I have a wonderful couple. He is a chaplain for the LA Chargers, which were formerly the San Diego Chargers. She is a licensed mental health counselor, and together they have a marriage ministry for sports teams. Please welcome George and Tondra Gregory.
Thank you for having us.
This is just
exciting.
great. You have a new thing coming up. You're going to be the new chaplain, right?
That's right.
So how do you feel about that? Are you excited?
I'm afraid. No, I'm really excited for the opportunity. It's a great opportunity, and plus, it's just what has been on our heart for quite a while.
Now, you've done other sports teams, right?
Yes,
What
we've
else have you done?
The New York Jets, the New York Giants, Baltimore Ravens. Just resourcing their team, but not as an official chaplain. But that's how we got our start, just helping out. And we encourage everybody to just start somewhere in what you feel like God has wired you to do, or you feel like your purpose is.
Now, see, this show is all about wisdom for the night, and that is a great piece of wisdom right off the bat.
Sure.
Whatever you think you're supposed to do, just start somewhere.
That's right.
Well, that's good. Well, I want to know your background, both of you. Tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Well, we grew up in the south part of North Carolina, southeastern part of North Carolina, Wilson and Goldsboro. Probably never heard of that. But I grew up in a two-parent home, middle class, and really had a great life, a really good life. But I was no choir boy, although my daddy was a pastor. And ironically, I was in the choir, but not a choir boy.
Yeah.
You see, I knew how to act. I knew how to make people think that I had it all together, or make people think that I was a good Christian guy, but underneath the surface, I was not. And
You're just a normal kid, and you're having to be a PK, a
normal
preacher's
kid, right? Felt the pressures of life, and really didn't know this God thing just quite yet, and yet I tried to put up a face as though I had it all together.
You really did try to do that?
Oh yeah.
And then behind the scenes, you were living however you wanted to live?
Yes, I lived my life in all sense of the word.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble?
Yeah, I got in trouble. Yeah, I spent a few nights in jail. Well, my dad had to come bail me out a couple of times. And my dad, thank God for a godly dad, because he knew that I needed grace. And so many times when he showed up, he was a disciplinarian, but he also showed me love, and he showed me the grace of God. And so I appreciate that. But it was hard seeing him come through the door.
Oh, I bet.
Many times.
I'd be dreading it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what'd you do? You went to school in?
Went to North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I met Tondra first day of school in Biology 101. And
now, what does this A&T stand for?
North Carolina Agricultural and State University.
Agricultural and Technical State University.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, that's what the wife's for.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so y'all met there.
We met there, freshman year, first day of class.
What'd you think the first time you saw her?
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yes. Well, she would say, I'd say wow, wow, wow to a lot of women, but definitely to her.
Yeah. He was definitely living his life, and women were a big part of that.
Okay, so tell me your background.
So I grew up in the complete opposite household as George, and I grew up in a single-parent household where I had a strong mom who did everything, right? She was making ends meet. She brought the bacon home, she fried it up, and she did everything. I did not have, my father was absent in my life.
Did you ever know him?
I never knew him, and I still do not know him to this day. My mom and him were teen parents, and she got pregnant with me when she was 16, and he just abdicated his role of being a father, and still to this day has never acknowledged having been my father to this day. So that's how I started out life, and those were the circumstances surrounding my birth. My mom was really hurt and grew bitter as time went on at all the struggles that she had to experience on her own as a young mom. And she grew
because if she started at 16, even by the age of 20, she's been doing it a long time.
Yeah. And back then, you could not go. You couldn't attend high school pregnant. That was in
So
the
she
South.
had to drop out of school?
She had to drop out of school. So there's a lot of hurt, a lot of shame, a lot of bitterness that she has been wounded by that whole experience. And so she parented me from this wounded, distorted lens, which made her very controlling over me and very protective over me, and just raised me to not trust people, basically, because of her experience of.
Was she afraid you'd go through the same thing she went through?
Oh, most definitely. She was very much bent on me, not having me repeat the lifestyle choices that she had experienced.
How'd that make you feel? Did you feel hemmed in, or did it not bother you?
I did. I felt somewhat controlled. That was a big part of it, was that I felt like I needed to do everything because I was appreciative of the sacrifice. As a kid growing up like that, you struggle with feeling like a burden, right? And so I wanted to do everything that I could do to make her life easier.
And to make her proud of you, I bet, too,
Yeah.
right? That's probably a big deal.
Yeah. So therefore, I did feel a lot of pressure and a lot of control, and a lot of trying to be everything and do everything she wanted me to do the way she wanted me to do it, and which really had me struggle with my identity after that, just trying to find my own way.
How'd you find your own way?
Well, it was with a lot of experimentation. So once I left home and went off to college, I really, really just tried everything that I thought people had shown me living life was about, which consisted of a lot of drugs, partying, drinking, boys, sex, all the things that people say, oh, you're really an adult or you're really living when you live this lifestyle.
You're very sophisticated.
Yeah. So that is where I started off my college career. But I'm so thankful that God had a plan from the day that I was conceived in my mother's womb, and he would not let that plan be blocked or derailed in any way. So I met the Lord. After doing 2 years of that, I grew very depressed.
Oh, really?
I said, you know what, this is empty. This is it. You live this and you die. It felt meaningless to me. And so I went into a depression because I'm like, gosh, I've been doing this for 2 years and it's like, I'm over it already. And I got so much life to live. And this is where George and I's paths intersect.
Oh, at that time you didn't know
Well,
him?
we knew each other, but it was parallel. But this is where it actually made an intersection because because we were friends our freshman year, and when I went into this depression, the Lord had him reach out to me, and he didn't know I was depressed at all, just as a friend, and he wanted to share that he had changed his life, and he wanted to share it with everyone he knew.
I can't wait to hear what happened to you.
So I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah,
you want to tell?
How did you get changed from being this guy that was living a life nobody knew about?
Well, I was running from God in every sense of the word.
You knew you were?
I knew I was. It was like St. Augustine in his book, The Confession, says that there was, as he was running from God, he heard a clanking chain, as if something was tied to his feet that he broke away from. And I heard that same chain. I knew I was called to be a preacher.
You did?
A very young age. But I knew I wanted to live life before I answered that call. And so,
didn't you really understand how people go through that?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I did it.
Yeah.
You know, you just think if that's what's fun and that's what everybody does, it seems so great, I want to do it.
Yeah, and we did it. We did.
And then the same bad stuff happens
That's
that
right.
you wish
We
you hadn't
did.
had to go through.
That's right. We did a lot of things, and both Tondra and I at the same time were going through our being pricked by God. And so I was working in between two African American ladies at American Express in the middle of summer school. And in the middle of the night, we worked at American Express. And on my way to work, I would go past a bridge. And there's a part in the Bible where it says, that when the Lord comes, that the sky will open up and their trumpet will sound. And I heard the voice of the Lord for 2 weeks straight when I got past this bridge say, if I came back tonight and the sky cracked and the trumpet sound, don't you know, you and all of your friends would probably spend eternal life
In
not in
hell?
a good place,
Yeah,
right?
in hell. In hell. Did
And
he
this
say
was,
in hell, or
he
did-
said in hell.
Then
And
call
for,
it
for
that.
2
Call
weeks,
it what it is.
for 2 weeks, I hear this. Every night I go to work. And so I found myself the last night before going to work, I went to the club and I got extremely intoxicated and I couldn't even go to work. And my friends, as a prank, threw me in my room at the boarding house and just closed the door and just left me. But right when I came in the room, I realized the presence of the Almighty God was there.
In that room.
I felt a tangible presence. And so sometimes in darkness, we feel that we're all alone, and yet God finds us in our lonely places. And that's where I
think
was.
God likes the darkness.
That's
because
right.
He can work undercover.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So I fell to my knees. I knew that I needed Jesus in my life. I knew I needed a Savior because I couldn't measure up. My dad had preached the gospel to me too many times for me not to understand who to turn to in that moment. And so I did. And I woke up the next morning on my knees. My dad was going to come up to see me that day. And when he got there, I ran outside and I said, Dad, guess what? I gave my life to Jesus last night. And he just started weeping as if he were sad. And I said, well, what's wrong? I did what you wanted me to do all these years. And he says, well, I'm crying because for 1 year to the day of today's date, I've been praying for you that God would call you to yourself, as it says in Luke with the prodigal son, that I would not know who I was with what I thought or what people thought, but who God thought I was. And that's what I met that night, is a loving God who loved me despite my circumstances or who I wasn't or who I was.
Wow. And your dad, 1 year to the day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did you tell him the story about Jesus talking to you on the bridge?
I did.
What did he think about that?
Well, he knew. He just says, God has to speak to us in numerous of ways. And maybe there's people out there in your audience that you feel somewhat like, well, who's talking to me? Or you get these moments, these impressions. I would listen to those impressions because we never know when the God of the universe is really talking to us through our circumstances.
Wow, really? All right. So now I know you're going along in your careers, but what do you think your purpose, God's purpose for you is? What do you think it is, your destiny?
Yeah, well, I think, for us, we were meant to be married. And it's ironic on how we actually got married. We were both believers, but yet there's a part of the Bible where it says that the spirit is willing, but the flesh gets weak. And we got weak one night, a couple of nights, and we had intercourse, and our son Jalen was conceived. And I looked at
Did
Tondra.
you hate to tell your mom you were pregnant?
I at that point, that was a scary thing to do.
Yeah,
even
because-
though I had graduated from college at that time, and I was an adult woman who had a college education, I don't know. It's just, I think anybody would be kind of scared to tell their parent.
Of course,
and
of course.
and I had
you love them and you respect them and you don't want to break their heart and you want to do everything you can to make them proud of you.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was afraid to tell her mom because I knew her mom owned a gun. And she kept looking at the drawer in which she had her gun.
She did, really? Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Oh,
I told her. But one thing as I looked at Tondra, the day that she told me she was pregnant, and there was one split second where we thought about abortion. And yet I told her, I said, listen, I'm not having any part of that. In fact, I want to marry you. And she says, but we're not in love. And I said, I'm not in love with you, but I love you. And we're best friends. And I could see ourselves being married because we're best friends. Now, I don't advise that.
No, that's a real story. There's people listening. There's somebody listening right now going, they're leaning toward the TV set because you're being real. They're really cluing into this. And so I never realized, y'all are so obviously in love with each other. Did it grow? What happened?
Yeah, it grew. We found ourselves married. and we had asked God's forgiveness, and we re-entered into ministry. I was a campus Bible study leader of the largest campus Bible study on campus, and so I had to step down from
Is
that.
this when you were at Duke?
This is when I was at A&T in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I had to step away from that for a season. But God's call was still there, and so I re-entered the ministry, and Tondra and I, being married, the first 2 years was really hard. It was really tough because what we thought was that we knew each other because, she thought I looked like Denzel and I thought she looked like, Halle Berry.
Yeah, well, actually, that's kind of true.
Yeah. But the unfortunate thing is that when most people get married, they don't have a roadmap. They don't have, a lot of people have not seen a great model of what a marriage should be. Now, I had seen that in my mom and dad, but it didn't look the same. She came from a one-parent household in which her mom pretty much dominated the house, and I came from a dual-parent home, which my dad was the head of the house. And so the things that I saw my dad do, I tried to do those things, but this sister, she was not having it.
Yeah. And so, and I do want to, I will go back to this point, but I don't want to go past this point when you find yourself at a crossroads. And when we found ourselves at this crossroad to be married and making a decision about whether to marry or not, that was a defining moment of, that God is, no matter what you have done, no matter where you feel like you've derailed his plan, nothing is hidden from God, and his plans will not be blocked. Now, he may have to redirect you back on path, but for us to be standing here today with a in love, married couple sharing with other married couples about how to build strong, healthy marriages, we are not, in the world's eye, we would be disqualified. But God's grace is sufficient, and his love covers a multitude of sins. And he doesn't see us through our works or our actions, but he sees us through what he created us to be. And that was a very hard thing for me to forgive myself. I could receive God's forgiveness, but I just could not forgive myself. But I had to push for that forgiveness, or I wouldn't be here today doing the ministry that God has for me.
Okay, well, let's stop right now because this show's about wisdom. A lot of people can't forgive themselves, even when they know God has forgiven them because they prayed and said, I'm so sorry, will you forgive me? They can't forgive themselves. And you said you had to push forward. What does that mean? So
when I say push to forgive myself, I had to keep saying, I forgive myself. And I had to keep out loud. And I had to keep declaring the scriptures about what God says about forgiveness. And eventually,
what scripture specifically? Do you remember one?
Well, that love covers a multitude of sin, that he cast our sins into the sea of forgetfulness, and that he has a plan for our life that won't be blocked. There are just multiple scriptures that I kind of that worked? Did you find yourself slowly forgiving yourself, or was it real fast? It was a slow process of forgiving myself. That forgiveness... Over months or a year? I would say over a year. But in the process, it wasn't like there wasn't progress, right? So it's not like So you made progress. It just took a long time to get it all done. Right. Because in that forgiveness, it was directly tied with my understanding who I was in God and who God was. Right. Yeah, and who God was. So was it hard for you to see her struggling with that?
We both struggled, but we didn't talk about it a lot. God had given us really so much grace to just keep going. But yet, internally, we processed, so much so that maybe 4 years ago, we went to see a prayer counselor at a ministry called RTF, Restoring the Foundations, and we didn't know we were still dealing with it until they asked us one question, and we both burst into tears.
Really? What was the question?
Well, they said, when we told them our story, they said, wow, that sounds like that was a hard time in your life. And they said, who was there for you? and we couldn't think of anybody.
Right.
And we burst into tears.
At the same time. And I'm a macho guy. I'd already told him I'm not going to cry.
Like that, yeah.
And yet we were still holding on. And so there's that word sin or your past. There's always a residue that's there, and we can keep going back over the residue, kind of like Resolve carpet cleaner. You think you clean it up, but it actually leaves residue that when you keep tracking back, is more dirt that comes into your home. We have residue. And yet the power of God allows us to be released if we choose on a daily basis to be released.
And you feel that now, right?
Yes.
Both of you feel released.
Yes.
Everything's
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
All
And
of
God
that.
doesn't waste any hurt or pain or any process that we go through. And because I've gone through this process and because we've gone through this process, He uses that for us to relate to other people and for us to help
Absolutely.
other people.
How could you relate to other people if you said, I came from a godly family, we never had any problems, we just got married, been love.
Sure.
People would be going, well, you can't help me
Yeah.
because first of all, I'd be embarrassed for you to know me.
That's right. And we get that a lot, especially living in a city like New York where image is everything. Some people say to us, if we told you our true story, you wouldn't even like us. And we say, well, if we had time to tell you, you would understand that we're just like you. My divinity professor at Duke used to say, we're all crooked sticks trying to make straight lines. And that's a reality.
Wow.
We all have something from our past that we're trying to overcome or something that we're dealing with. And the lie of the enemy of our soul just tells us on a daily basis or weekly basis that we're no better now than we were then, and that's just not true. God says He takes us from glory to glory and from strength to strength.
And if that's true, you're not going backwards from the last glory.
Right.
That's right.
You're always going up.
Yeah.
Well, now tell me a little bit about this that you're going to be doing with Los Angeles Chargers, because this marriage ministry you have is called what?
Journey for Life.
All right. So is it going to be part of it too?
Well, because who we are, Journey for Life, we developed a nonprofit organization so that we could grow into what God had called us to do. So wherever we go, we resource marriages through our website, through our videos on our website,
So
through our
people
blog
could do
posts.
that. They could go to your website.
Oh yeah, they
get
can
stuff?
go
Okay.
right now to our website and see articles that would really provoke them. One of our articles is 25 questions every married couple should ask themselves.
Okay.
And that's just a tutorial or something, a tool that they can use to keep
Would
it
you
fresh.
recommend that for somebody that's thinking about getting married? Those
Oh, yeah.
25?
Oh yeah. What we feel like we're wired to do is really set a great foundation for marriage. So we love pre-marriage. We love to help people create a good foundation for marriage. To about maybe the first 7 years, it doesn't necessarily stop there, but first 7 years so that we will build a healthy foundation for marriage. And then we're being proactive instead of reactive. My wife's a counselor, so she sees a lot of couples that are reacting to life as opposed to going to pre-marriage counseling on the front end to figure out what you need to do to have a successful marriage. But
So what will you be doing with the Chargers with this? What will you actually be doing, and then what will you be doing as a couple?
Well, everything we do together.
Oh, okay.
And that's a great part of who God's called us to be in our marriage. And it's ironic that how we started off, we're helping couples to have successful relationships and marriages. And so half of chaplaincy is really supporting these NFL players and their wives, the coaches, and their marriages, and really discussing with them and leading them to a decision that we work on our marriage now so that we can have a future later. 70% of NFL players divorce after retirement. 70%.
After retirement?
After retirement.
Why not during retirement when they're still playing?
Well, because I'm not a player, I don't know everything about that statistic, but I could imagine that when the money's not there anymore, there's probably something of a foundation that gets shaken a little bit, or maybe it's the prestige, or maybe it's the quality of life. And yet when we go in and talk with couples, we tell them, listen, if you don't start now today offsetting that statistic, then it's almost for sure that 70% of you will end in divorce. And no one wants that.
When you say that? Do
Well,
they really clue in and listen?
They have to, because no one starts off marriage saying, I want to be a part of that 70% to get a divorce. But unless we offset that by intentionality, any one of us can see ourselves in a divorce situation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Tondra, what do you tell the wives that have to live with this husband that has women pursuing him and he's being tempted? What do you tell those women?
Well, it's important to cultivate a emotional attunement in your marriage.
Being in tune with each other?
Yes, emotionally in tune. So you have to, your marriage is just like any garden. If you neglect it, then that's when weeds can come in and kill the life in that garden and destroy the fruit of whatever you're trying to nurture and grow. So it's being very intentional. Having a healthy, strong marriage is not something that happens haphazardly. It's something that you intentionally prioritize and diligently work towards.
You know, I think a lot of people think if you're in love, it ought to just happen. But that's not what you're saying, is it? Even if you're in love, really in love, you're saying you still have to work at it, right?
You still have to work at it. Love is commitment.
Yeah, in the good times and the bad
And
times.
the bad
That's right.
times.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So love is an act of the will. It's not a feeling.
Well, George, what do you see as with these NFL players that you've worked with? What is their greatest need that you see?
I think the greatest need is really someone to walk beside them who's not looking for anything from them. Not a coach that's expecting
that's
anything,
true.
not a family member that's trying to get, in the limelight, or friends that's trying to say, hey, can you give me some money? It's
give me
really
some tickets.
someone who is really just coming alongside and just saying, listen, I'm here to walk with you. I'm here to talk with you. And what we do well together as a couple is, because I'm a pastor, I've got some answers, some wisdom in the night for people, right? But my wife is a therapist, and so we're able to give practical tools and practical help. There's single guys on the team, not all married, so it's half marital support. But some of those guys, they just need a father figure. They need to see a good marriage modeled so that when they are married, they'll have someone that they can go back to. So we're really excited that we can mentor, we can counsel, we can pastor, we can cut up. We're just ordinary people, by the way. So we love to laugh and we love to invite these players over our home.
Well,
and
that's
we're just excited.
great. I want to really thank you. I thank you, too, so much for tuning in tonight. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV, and I hope you received some great wisdom about marriage, about as an individual serving the Lord, about how to actually receive the Lord into your life, because He loves you, and He wants to let this great plan He has for you take place. So I hope you have a lot of wisdom from this. I hope you have a great night, the rest of the night, whether you're going to sleep or you're going to work. I'll see you next time. Bye.